Hi everyone. Today we're going to be looking at integrating plugins with Max MSP. Here on the left hand side, if you click on plugins, you'll see a list of every plugin on your system that Max has access to. Now it's important to keep in mind that everyone's list will look a little bit different. If you are on a PC, for example, you will not have AU plugins. These are proprietary for Apple. Most people will have VSTs kind of built into your computer. If you have other DAWs or other software, you might have those in here as well. And then I think most Max users will have access to the Max for Live plugins that come with Max. But with this in mind, it's really important to remember that not everyone is going to have the same plugins. So if your piece relies heavily on one of these effects and you send it to somebody else to perform, they might not have that same effect. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We're going to be looking at just a few different kinds of plugins. I wanted to start with the AU. As I mentioned, these are the proprietary plugins for Apple. So if we take something like just a high pass filter, it's kind of a simple one. You'll see that we have a few sliders, and if you lock your patch, you can move these up and move these down. Now this is similar to some of the other filters that we've already seen in Max, so we're not really adding anything new with this effect, but I just wanted to demonstrate how to use these AU plugins. Because filtering can cause a little bit of feedback, I'm just going to use an audio file to demonstrate this for now. And I would encourage you to use an easy ADC so that you can hear the processing live. And as usual, I recommend you use headphones if you're just working with your laptop microphone. But here we have a little example of from the Goldberg variations. As you can see, if I hover over the left inlet, we have audio or control input. And here we have the input of channel 2. Then we need a gain slider. I'll just use mono for now. And an easy digital to audio converter. If I loop this, so you can hear it's a filtering effect, of course. And this is the cutoff frequency. So high pass meaning only high frequencies pass through. Now, one of the advantages of these AU plugins is that we can automate some of these things using low frequency oscillators, MIDI controllers, pretty much anything that that you can think of that would communicate with Max. It's important to understand that with AU plugins, the way we control these externally, if you don't want to be clicking and moving with your mouse, is through this index right here. This number indicates that the cutoff frequency, the first parameter here, is parameter index number 1. The resonance is parameter index number 2. Different AU effects will have different numbers of indices. So this graphic EQ, as you can see, has 32 different indices, right? So to access each of these, you would need a different number. In order to change these values internally in Max, you would need a message with the index and a variable. Remember, this is the parameter index and the variable. The nice thing about AU is that the variable is always between 0 and 1. So always use a float. And what I mean by this is, even though right here we're at 10,535 hertz, this gets scaled, the entire range of the cutoff frequency gets scaled between 0 and 1. Okay, so it's pretty powerful in the sense of it's highly standardized. We can use an LFO, for example, cycle of a 0.5. snapshot. This will just be a low oscillator. Scale of 1 and 1. And let's say between 0.01 and 0.3. Slow that down even more, probably. Now we have an LFO controlling the cutoff frequency. All right. This is just to demonstrate how all of this stuff works. If we wanted to control the resonance, we would have a similar message, but instead of index 1, this would be index 2. Right? Same deal. Okay, as you can see, with more complex AU plugins, you have a lot more variables and a lot more functionality. So keep this in mind. AU plugins require the parameter index and a variable between 0 and 1. And I'm not demonstrating it with a microphone, of course, because we can get a lot of feedback. I'll just minimize this for now. If you didn't want to automate it and you wanted to have it just set, you can set the values, and you can actually save them right here with the snapshot object. So if I click on snapshot, and then right here, this little button on the right will allow us to recall the values. So it'll allow us to recall previously saved values. That's also a good functionality, a good way to use this. So moving on, I wanted to take a quick look at some Max for Live effects plugins, because they're, as I mentioned, most people that have Max will have these. They're a little bit more standardized. They're standardized in terms of whether it's a PC or a Mac. And they're a little more powerful and a little more interesting. So if you go to your plugins and click on Live Devices, you have an entire list right here of Max for Live plugins that we can use. Let's try the maybe spectral harmonizer. As you can see, it has a nice user interface. We have gain. We've got some delay time, transposition, detuning in sense, shifting in frequency, and then panning left and right. Hovering over the inlets and outlets will indicate what these do. So we have channel 1 and 2 out right here. And for now, I will use an easy ADC. Let's attach it to a gain slider so we can control our input. And I'll just have the same microphone going to both channels for now. I don't really need a gain slider coming out of the outlet, because it actually has gain control right here. So if I were to, because our effect has different effects for left and right, I'll be separating these and sending them to the different channels. Now, one of the problems or one of the issues with AUs or plugins is that if you were to open the help file, it only gives you information on the objects that host the plugins. The AMXD will host Max for Live devices, right? This VST tilde will host audio plugins. So you don't get a lot of information as to what the different parameters of the effect are. This takes a little bit of experimentation and fine-tuning. But in this case, we can kind of figure it out. We have a delay time, right, in milliseconds right here. We have transposition in semitones. So 4 semitones up, 6 semitones down. You can also detune in cents, and then frequency shift in terms of hertz. Okay. So if we were to, and then we have feedback. We know, having studied delay lines, that this is the level of our feedback in our delay line. This is delay time in milliseconds, 1.15 seconds, and 500 milliseconds on the right. So what this is essentially a delay pitch shifter. Okay, we can make this easily ourselves, but in this case, it's already made for us. It's probably a little hard to hear with the microphone. But essentially, it's what we looked at in class with every time it's fed back into the delay line, it gets, in this case, the left channel gets pitch shifted up 4 semitones. The right channel gets pitch shifted or transposed down 6 semitones. Okay? Could be a little bit of fun. And with some feedback. Beautiful. Magical. And just like with the audio units, we can actually control these parameters. We can save them with snapshot right here and then recall them. This is kind of like a preset management. Or we could access them externally like we did here. Now, unlike the audio unit plugins, you can see that there's no parameter index. So what we actually need, we need to know what these parameters are. So we're going to need to send a get params message to the left inlet of the Max for Live object, and then we're going to need a print object out of the right outlet. And if you were then click on that message, there's a list of the names of all of the parameters here, and these are actually case sensitive as well. So if we wanted, let's say we wanted like a vibrato on this left channel, we could take the detune L, right, attach a low frequency oscillator to this, and then create our own little custom vibrato. I'll just move this to the side. Now, unlike the detune L and then a variable, unlike the AU object, the values here are not scaled between 0 and 1. They correspond to the actual values that we see in the user interface. So this will be between 50 and negative 50 cents. So we can have an integer here. And now we can go, let's say, up and down a quarter of a semitone. Negative 25 cents and 25. This is a nice slow vibrato. We could probably speed that up. And you can, of course, do this with every single parameter. Right. I'm only using this little cycle object, but you can connect this to a MIDI controller, to the mouse using the mouse state button. You can have presets, you can have a metronome kind of clicking through, you can have this randomized. Of course, the functionality is very versatile. I wanted to just demonstrate one last Max for Live object that I found kind of interesting, which is the micro tuner, I think. Micro. There it is. Unlock our patch. And this allows us to, it's essentially like an auto tune, but it allows us to auto tune to a microtonal scale. So I'll just copy some of this. It's usually good practice to only have one easy ADC and one easy DAC in your patch. But I'll just duplicate these to demonstrate what's going on. We can get our parameters here. These are all of the different parameters that are in the microtuner. We'll send our input. I'll have the same going to left and right for now. And right here, this is a grid that represents semitones. This is the amount of correction that is going to be applied to the incoming signal. Now, if I wanted to create, let's say, a microtonal scale, a quarter tone scale, I would change the resolution from 100 cents. Remember, 100 cents is a semitone. I would change that to 50 cents, which is a quarter tone. And so now, when it receives incoming pitches, it will round them, it'll analyze the frequency of these, and it will round them to this particular scale. The best way to sort of understand what's happening here is for you to experiment a little bit with it to understand what's going on. We can adjust our gain. Getting a little feedback. It's probably hard to hear. But what it's doing is it's basically what you're hearing is just the clean guitar sound, and then the guitar sound that has been pitch shifted to correspond to this little predetermined scale. And we can have multiple different patterns sort of saved here. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in exploring live processing, or if you have your own plugins that you've bought and that you like to use in your workflow, I would encourage you to experiment with this and figure out how to integrate them into your Max patch. As usual, if you have any questions, please let me know. Enjoy.